Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Onesies, the podcast where we talk about one-season wonders and blunders. My name's Andrew.
My name's Emily.
And we are talking about Freaks and Geeks. We're talking about episodes 2 and 3 this episode. Now, we are talking about them in air order, not 3 and 4. We are talking about episodes 3 and 4 this episode. And we're doing that in air order, not production code order. So if you're following along on DVD or Blu-ray, you're going to have to skip around.
And last week we were wrong. We were going to do it another way, but we decided that this was better. And probably in terms of storyline, I think it works better.
We'll get to it. I'm very glad that we watched the 4th episode, whichever it was. So tests and breasts. Very glad that that's the episode we ended up watching. But that's not the first episode we watched. We watched
Tricks and Treats, which is a special Halloween episode of Freaks and Geeks. Very special Halloween episode. So we have kind of 2.5 storylines converging. You've got the geeks who Sam decides he wants to continue to be young, doesn't want to read that pesky Russian literature and wants to continue to be a kid. And he convinces his friends to go trick-or-treating with him again. And you have Lindsay, who agrees to hand out candy with her mother until she gets an invite from the Freaks to just cruise around on Halloween. And then the half storyline is the parents, the Weir parents, kind of handling the situation with their kids growing up and managing to hand out treats at home. So what are your 3 things, Andrew?
So my 3 things are... okay, so I'll do crime and punishment because that encompasses 3 things on its own. People suck, and I don't know. Maybe did he seem upset?
Okay, and I have kind of along with yours book reports, your first one. I have urban myths and I have Count Floyd. Those are my 3 things. So the first thing I guess we can start with is the book report, because we, I think, start the episode with the geeks in their presumably English class, and the teacher is chastising them for reading goofy, silly books. I can't remember what they are off the top of my head now, but do you remember?
Well, there are some goofy, silly books, but then she throws in Sammy Davis's autobiography because she's a fucking racist piece of shit. Is why.
And maybe even anti-Semitic, because it's Neil who's reading that one. And she chastises them and tells them that what they should be reading is Crime and Punishment. So
these are freshmen.
These are freshmen.
Freshmen.
I didn't even read that in college, I don't think. But I was in college 20 years after this. So maybe in 1980, they were teaching Crime and Punishment in high school in suburban Detroit.
I think they'd been smarter after that. Yeah. So, I mean, there's that level of like, wow. So it's like this multi-tiered, like, okay, so it's a shitty teacher who's doing a bad job of teaching, partially because she's a bigot. But before this, we'd established that we also forgot that the first scene is actually a good Martin Starr scene. They bet him he can't drink.
Oh, yeah.
They concoct for him.
Yeah.
And so it's just this comedy tag where they put a bunch of weird shit in a blender and Martin Starr drinks it and is like,
did you ever
pretty good actually.
Did you ever play that game as a kid?
Never for money and never that gross, but I mean it's basically just the extension of the fountain every soda at the fountain type thing. But yeah, and so he likes that. But then they
that is a funny scene.
Actually, yeah, that is good. But then they talk with their Sam and Lindsay talk with their parents about Halloween. And that's where we establish Lindsay's going to help, but also that Sam thinks that Halloween is stupid.
Right.
And he's going to hang out with his friends and go see The Nude Bomb, which is the Get Smart movie. And Dad gets upset at the title. And so that, I suppose, raises another one of my pop culture reference things in here, where sometimes on Freaks and Geeks, they throw away pop culture that it seems like they got off of a, like, what happened this year thing. It's some of the pop culture references are good. Some of them just seem like, do these, like, who the fuck went to see The Nude Bomb? Really? Like, okay. Like, I saw it when I was like 7. Like, I don't know if I was 13. I don't know if I could read the first 2 sentences of Crime and Punishment and still see The Nude Bomb. Well, the other thing is the teacher gives one of the examples of a bad book is the Star Wars novelization, and that's got like a reading level of like 13th grade. Like the first Star Wars novelization is a fucking slog, man. I tried reading that for years before I finally did as a kid. Anyway, so yeah, they're going to read Crime and Punishment, and they have to read a bunch of it by Monday too, which is not easy with Crime and Punishment.
Over a Halloween weekend? That's just cruelty. That's absolute cruelty. Because even if you're not going out trick-or-treating, maybe you're having a party. Millie's got some kind of social event going on at her church that she invites Lindsay to. There's stuff going on. Sam Levine's character, Neil, he has got something going on at his synagogue. There's stuff going on, and you're making these kids read a huge chunk of Crime and Punishment over the weekend. How rude. Yeah, so book reports. I was not a reluctant reader necessarily as a young person, but I didn't want to read anything assigned for school. So again, you're going to find this a lot with me. This resonated with me a lot because I would have been the person reading not necessarily the Star Wars novelization or the Sammy Davis Jr. biography, but I would have been reading Stephen King or Anne Rice or some other, just garbage that I loved reading when I was 13.
Were you reading Flowers in the Attic?
I read Flowers in the Attic when I was like in 7th grade.
That's the appropriate age to read about incest.
Duh. I read Carrie when I was 10, so I learned the C word pretty young.
Yeah, actually that kicks off my whole like, when did anti-intellectualism stop being so funny? And then I realized it was the subsequent year when Bush became president. But this is from 99, where you could still have a subplot about like, no, I don't want to grow up. I want to be a kid. It's just like, I got no sympathy for Sam this episode, except later because anyway, we'll get to it. But as all this is happening with Sam and the geeks, the scene where we find out that Millie's got a church dance is when they're waiting for the bus, and Daniel, James Franco, and Kim drive past, and Millie gives Daniel, she like chastises him for having a noisy car.
It's so delightfully awkward. Just my dad says that your car needs a new muffler. I think he's right. Like it's so very like innocent and childlike, like kids say the darndest things type of a situation. And she's just a little too old for that.
Which is going to, change because right after this, the next time we see Millie, we discover that she's had a secret love.
Yeah.
All this year. They met over the summer, which means that she's had the secret love the whole show. And she hasn't told Lindsay about it because Lindsay can't get a dude. basically. And that's
didn't want her to feel bad. That's very sweet.
Yeah. So that's kind of just a throwaway before sort of reestablishing the awkwardness of Lindsay being single amid the geeks or the freaks, because she thinks she's going on a double Halloween date with oh, that was my other one. Ted Nugent always sucked. That's my other point. She thinks she's going on a double date with, what's Jason Segel's name? Nick. Yeah, she thinks she's going on a de facto double date with Nick in the back seat while Kim and Daniel drive around, which is interesting because apparently we are never going to resolve Nick's attempted sexual assault because that's okay behavior. Let's not forget. Let's not forget. These guys were making movies with James Franco 5 years ago, right?
Yeah,
they've never really come out too strong on certain behaviors of men that are inappropriate. So, so the freaks thing is sort of building up to them hanging out on Halloween, and how is Lindsay going to tell mom that she's not going to hand out Halloween candy? And it's initially kind of sympathetic with mom, sucks. Her daughter's abandoning her. And then mom shows up dressed like a cowgirl, but like if a toddler dressed up like a cowgirl.
Or like a Busby Berkeley musical fantasy cowgirl.
Right.
Or like one of those people at the front of a marching band with the baton.
Yeah. Somebody makes a joke about it. What is the joke that they compare it to? It's not like that apt of a comparison, but it's kind of funny. When Sam's friends see mom, Sam says he doesn't like him when mom gets goofy, or he says that to Lindsay or something. But so instead Lindsay's going to go hang out with these kids, and she's just basically going to run out on mom. And the added element of this is that mom is actually baking cookies.
Yeah.
Which is going to figure into that subplot with the parents about how it's not just their kids changing, it's the world.
And that fits into my urban myths.
Yes, we need to talk about that. Yes, that's who that guy is. Okay. Floyd is his name? Okay, go.
No, not Floyd. No? Harris is the other guy.
King Nerd is
King Nerd. Yeah. So the geeks are walking around school talking about going trick-or-treating, what they're going to be, whatever, or just whatever their daily lives are. And Harris comes up to them, the geek guru. And after a conversation about urban myths, watch out for razor blades and watch out for turds dipped in chocolate in wrappers. I thought that was hilarious. Oh, and candy.
So you won't know the difference.
Yeah, and heroin in the candy as a
to make sure. What is it? It's political to make sure Reagan doesn't fuck over the Reagan election.
Yeah, something like that.
The hippies are going to poison kids or something.
Yeah, with heroin. It's very weird. But it's really goofy, and I remember those as a kid too. Not necessarily the heroin, the political element of it. I think by the time any high schoolers were into conspiracy theories, we were not going to be going trick-or-treating necessarily.
And also, this is 1999, so it is still pre all of this being provable fucking nonsense.
Yeah.
It's not it's not like you could just Google it or look it up on Wikipedia and find the citations yet. You were still at the point where when I bitch about the show aging poorly, this I actually don't have a problem with. This is contextually fine with me.
Yeah. And, we still see shit like that in the news. There's with legal marijuana in many places, it's watch out, hippies are going to give your kid $20 worth of edibles, and it's like, no, I'm not giving my edibles away.
I'm not giving my edibles to some fucking kid, please.
No way.
You got parents of your own to buy you edibles.
No shit.
Yeah, it's I wonder how that ages though. Like urban myths, how does that age in the like current? Like, because I mean,
information literacy challenge that we all face.
Yeah, well, we'd say information literacy challenge, except a fifth grader is better informed than the founding fathers. So a fifth grader in 2022 knows more about the actual reality than right.
Except that there's a lot of misinformation that is easy to get your hands on and it's easy to buy into. And I mean,
true, but I mean, like the Halloween myths were, I mean, it was all nonsense, right? Like, yeah, it was all just nonsense forever. So,
yeah. I loved that urban myth thing, and how it comes into play with mom is really sad. But we'll get to that.
Yes,
with
we'll
their
get to
subplot. So Lindsay ends up running out on her mom, like last minute. The geeks all show up to meet Sam. Harris's introduction to the family is very funny when he comes in with I'm a guy with a knife through his head. And he's got blood dripping down, and he's just very as a matter of fact, and it's hilarious. The whole scene with what's his name getting into his costume is very funny.
Yes, with Bill.
Yes.
Okay, so what's the other? Neil goes as Groucho Marx, and there's he has some trouble getting dressed because he's got to he needs his mom's help with the mustache, and we don't meet the mom, but it's he goes Hitler mustache accidentally. Mom's got to help, which is kind of funny. But Bill has an elaborate Bionic Woman costume, which is basically just a blonde woman with a bigger bosom.
Yeah, giant fake boobs.
The actual Bionic Woman.
Yeah. Well, proportions. You gotta proportionize, right? But him getting into the costume and then him getting into character, talking on the phone, like
that was good. Yeah,
that was funny.
Yeah.
Sorry, Steve Austin, I can't hear you. Let me put it on my other ear. No, not so loud. That's my bionic ear. It's so silly. And I loved it so much. Like I'm crying thinking about it. He's so brilliant in that. Anyway, they show up at Sam's to pick up Sam. And Lindsay just kind of runs out the door like, I'll be back soon. And doesn't tell them where she's going, doesn't tell them who she's with. She just leaves. And I think she's a sophomore, maybe a junior. I don't remember exactly how old she is. And I don't think it's ever stated. But, you know, it's becoming increasingly obvious that she's got a new set of friends and her parents are a little concerned about that. So mom's handing out the cookies by herself, and dad is sort of being grumpy dad and doesn't want to have anything to do with Halloween until somebody comes to the door. She hands them cookies and they refuse them.
Because mom might be poisoning people. And it turns out that the parents are making kids dump the freshly baked Halloween cookies on the lawn.
Yeah. And it's sad.
Which is, it's sort of cuts through the annoyingness of mom to make her immediately empathetic or sympathetic.
And it doesn't hurt that the mom who there's one mom who's like, I've been telling my kids all week not to take unwrapped candy. And it's like, what a bitch. Like, So it also seems like this is a bigger suburb, a bigger town than maybe I had imagined in my mind. If they don't know who she is, and they don't trust her enough to take candy from her or take cookies from her,
right?
It must be a small town. It's not necessarily a small town. So I'm still trying to put the pieces together, but it is a fictional place, so it probably just takes elements of wherever Paul Feig grew up, and that's it. So she makes dad. She has made Harold put on a costume, a vampire costume, and he comes to the door and scares the shit out of the kids. Dressed as a vampire, which harkens back to SCTV and his character Count Floyd. That's my third point. Count Floyd is I don't know if you're an SCTV fan, No,
I didn't grow up close enough to Canada. Sorry.
Okay. He was Count Floyd was one of those like midnight movie characters, like an Elvira type, where he was really stupid and silly, but he was that guy on SCTV. And he's done it on other things. I think he opened for Rush, or he did like some stage show for like a musical concert. I don't know, whatever. Doesn't matter. So it's a callback to Count Floyd. And I thought that was really cute and funny, and makes him go buy candy when she realizes the cookies are not going to go over well. He goes and buys candy, and it's Smarties, which is my personal favorite candy. So I was excited about that. About
Halloween
Smarties.
Candy. It's good Halloween candy, because you have a bunch, right? Like, you get 3 rolls of Smarties. That's a significant amount of candy.
Yeah, that's a lot. And there's a bully callback. So the freaks, the geeks are out trick-or-treating, and they've got their plan. They're going to go to the rich neighborhood first because they got the best candy. And they're all dressed in their costumes walking down the street, and people are like staring at them. And I think it's mostly Bill.
Mostly because of Bill. And to which Bill says, it's like nobody's ever seen the Bionic Woman before.
And Neil's response is, maybe they didn't think she was so attractive in real life. But it's funny to me that until that moment, it's not commented upon that he's dressed as a woman. I mean, except for the fact that I'm the Bionic Woman.
Right.
Nobody questions it. Nobody gives him a screwy look until he gets out on the street, and people who don't know him are looking at him funny. I thought that was interesting and very progressive, and of the show to have it where people just are like, oh, that's Bill. He loves the Bionic Woman, and he wanted to be the Bionic Woman. It's like a little kid wanting to dress up as, I couldn't think of a contemporary, like Elsa from Frozen, a little boy.
Right.
Wants to dress up as Elsa, and his family and friends are like, yay, but then you take him out on the street and he might get some goofy looks. Hopefully not in 2022.
From shitty people. Shitty people.
Yeah.
Who's the Beyonce for boys? Beyonce. Okay. So Lindsay in the car discovers that Seth Rogen is there, so it is no longer a double date. Seth Rogen, whose character's name escapes me because he's not in the next episode, so I remember it. He missed out. He didn't get to go to his Ted Nugent concert, and I was just like, wow, I like him so much less. Like, Ted Nugent still fucking sucked in 1980, man. Like, whatever. He's a terrible person all the way down.
Yeah.
But what they're doing is driving around and having some mischief, basically. Lindsay wants to do things. Kim makes fun of her for wanting to do things.
Going to see a movie, or going to a
just I don't know, anything. Yeah, anything she suggests, Kim shits on, because Kim thinks thinking is stupid. So, and that's when Lindsay has the realization that maybe the freaks kind of suck. Like, we'll get to it at the end, but like, some of this is just like, Lindsay's entire episode is just observing that everybody around her is disappointing in some way or another, right? Like, Millie's embarrassing, but Daniel and Kim are shitty in their way, and Jason Segel tried to grope her, and
Seth Rogen's just sort of a snarky asshole.
Seth Rogen seems to have one of the more uneven characters.
Yeah. So they decided to wreak a little bit of havoc, and Lindsay is not on board at first. So Nick goes out and kicks in a pumpkin, right? Like, he just kicks the face out of it and runs back to the car giggling. And the sort of punchline is that it's Gruber's house. It's Mr. Rosso's house. He comes out and he's like, oh man. And he takes the pumpkin away, and then he comes out and brings out another pumpkin. I thought that was great. I thought it was super funny.
That was like the funniest thing in the episode. Like,
it was
so
the only
good comedy beat. Like,
besides that Martin Starr thing. Yeah. It was so good. And Lindsay goes out and kicks a pumpkin and it gets like stuck on her foot and it's like really embarrassing, but she's having a good time. She's laughing. And then suddenly they're with a baseball bat knocking, post boxes. Post boxes? Mailboxes. Thank you. I'm losing my mind. Knocking off mailboxes, which is a federal offense. I'm shocked that she's willing to jump from kicking in faces of carved pumpkins to committing federal crimes. Or maybe it wasn't then.
One kind of weird thing about this is all of this happens during the day.
Yeah.
So it's like Halloween started at 4:30 or something, and it didn't get dark until like 9, because the entire arc for both the kids, because Sam is gonna, they run into the bullies and they fight again, and it does not go that well for the geeks, which leads to Neil sort of yelling at Sam about how like, this was your idea, man. And it's like, it was hard for me to feel particularly sympathetic to Sam, because I'm like, yeah, dude, like this was probably not a great idea, right? You didn't have a good motive for doing it. And it's just like, but then he gets immediately sympathetic again because somebody's going to egg him.
Yeah, the freaks have 24 eggs, and they decide they're going to wreak some havoc. And Lindsay doesn't see, and the freaks see the kids, but maybe they don't recognize that Sam is her brother. Maybe they don't recognize the kids at all because they're in costumes. And Sam gets egged. And Lindsay, the whole group is laughing.
Lindsay.
Yeah, by Lindsay. And the whole group is laughing, driving away. And she turns around and she notices it's her brother. A little continuity thing. By the time the car got far enough away, she wouldn't have been able to tell who it was. But she fights and fights and fights to get them to stop the car. And they finally do. And she jumps out, and Sam kind of scowls at her. And I don't know, do they even exchange words? She apologizes. And he's just like, walks away. It's like, fuck off, and walks away.
Her apology has always come with the condition of don't tell.
Yeah.
Don't tell on me.
Yeah.
And so they go home, and he gets home right before her, and their mom and dad are mortified that he got egged, and they ask him who egged him. And he says, just a bunch of freaks, which I think is the first time that we've called them the freaks. And then
mom's response is, what? Freaks, circus freaks?
And dad makes a Korean War reference, which was 1950. So I guess is accurate, whatever. But that Lindsay's wearing his Korean War thing. I wore my dad's Vietnam jacket for a while. I guess it would hold up that long. But
he talks in the next episode about Vietnam. Or is that, no, that's Coach that's the math teacher.
Yeah, that's Biff.
Yeah.
Or no,
it's the other guy.
It's the math teacher. Yeah. So Lindsay gets home, and Sam doesn't tell on her. Does mom comment on how people are meaner these days?
Yeah.
And then Lindsay has this moment with mom where she's like, well, didn't people egg when you were a kid? And she's like, well, yeah, but I never would have done anything like that. And so it's like, oh, well, maybe Lindsay's just a shitty person too. She goes to try to talk to Sam, who informs her that nobody thinks she's cool. And she says, I know Sam. I know.
Yeah. And because in the car, I think Busy Phillips' character, Kim, says something like, I knew she was going to be a drag. Just take her home. Like, she was going to be a drag. I knew it the whole time. Just stop it. Just take her home. And, so she, I think, kind of has that realization before Sam says anything. And Sam just kind of confirms it.
And so, but then Lindsay goes and puts on her costume to hand out candy with mom. And she wears a prince costume, not a princess costume, by accident. And the kids are cute. They presumably get bagged candy. And Sam and dad have a little moment at the end of the episode. And then, the
and
after
Sam
school
is reading
special's over.
And
Yes.
Sam is reading Crime and Punishment in bed.
People with funny names.
Yeah.
Or whatever. And so it's kind of like this, it's very much an after school special without much of a third act.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And
the humor is a little bit sparse in this one. It's a little bit more tragic than funny.
This one, especially after the next episode, I feel like James Franco was pretty bad in terms of acting this episode. Like, he's worse with Busy Phillips when they have stuff to do together than when he's got stuff to do with Linda.
I think that their chemistry was not great because there were some antics on set.
James Franco and antics? I find that hard to believe. Also, James Franco often sucked, especially during this period as an actor. So it also could just be he wasn't very good. So, but yeah, outside the Bill stuff, the Rosso thing, was way too big of a highlight for literally it's like a comic strip pacing, right?
Yeah.
Comes out, oh no, goes in, brings out the exact same thing. It's all good. And it's just I was just like, this is way too funny for, just being this throwaway moment. But
I thought it was great. And, part of me wants to think that it was just something he did, oh, we're going to do another take of this. So, inside, behind the door, there's another pumpkin. Will you just grab it and put it out? And so he was just doing it to set up for another set, or it became or for another take, and it became part of the script. I want it to be something more than it probably is. But it was hilarious. I thought that was a great choice on their part to have that in there. Poor Mr. Rosso. He gets so much shit. And then this next episode he does as well. Anything else you want to say about tricks and treats? That looks like a no. Looks like a
no, because I don't want to shit on it, because we're going to have to turn that all around with the next one.
Absolutely.
Which is my favorite episode.
Tests and breasts. Really? Better than the pilot. You liked it.
It's closer. But it also goes further than the pilot does. It introduces sort of, I don't know, some realistic wackiness to it by the end. That's really cool. And also Rosso's got a nice arc in it.
Yeah.
And also Biff has a nice arc. I've got my complaints. Don't worry. We'll get into it. But otherwise, no. This was the episode that I was like, okay, thank goodness.
Yeah.
Thank goodness.
Okay, good. So for tests and breasts, my three things are anatomy, pop, and you're manipulating me.
Okay, my three things are track 3, just disappear, and which is related, and is weird urges the same as pop?
No.
Okay.
I mean, it might be. It might be. It might be the same, but it's not. I think.
Okay.
What you're talking about is Jason Segel, and I'm talking about Busy Phillips in the same scene.
Okay.
Essentially.
All right,
so
cool.
this has 2 storylines as well, 2 A's, I think, right? So on the geek side, Sam is taking anatomy class, or not anatomy class. He's taking sex ed with
non-co-ed sex ed with Coach Biff.
Yeah, with Coach Fredericks, played by Biff Tannen. And they overhear somebody telling a joke that we never actually hear the full joke, but they don't understand it. And they are on a quest to understand it. And then Lindsay's storyline is that I'm saying it's Lindsay's storyline because I don't want it to be Daniel's. Daniel is failing his math class, and she offers to help him study so he can pass this test that's coming up, so he doesn't fail and have to take it again. And then the stories do kind of intertwine again and then untangle themselves from each other. So two things, both of us have a thing that's not necessarily related to either of the storylines.
Nope.
So my thing is the Pop thing. They're sitting and they're just talking, the freaks outside. Lindsay's talking to Busy Phillips, Kim, and Jason Segel is sitting there drumming on his knee like a dope. And he purposefully spills some soda on Busy Phillips. And that's when he says, "Oh, sorry, I just have weird urges sometimes." And she's like, "That's great. I have to go around with pop on me all day." And the way she says pop is just perfectly Midwestern. That O is just like nasally. Oh, it's so brilliant. And I love it, particularly because I'm teased relentlessly for calling it pop by my husband. And so it's just nice to have it because he's a regionalist and he believes that pop is soda.
Soft drink. He calls it a soft drink.
I would like a Coca-Cola Classic, please, he says. Calls it by the brand.
I had a history professor in undergrad who was like talking about that, soda versus pop. He's like, "Oh, you're from California. You just call everything Coke." Maybe that's what they did in the 60s. I don't know. Yeah. So that's actually the last thing that Jason Segel is in the episode for. Thank goodness.
No, he's in it later. He drums on when Daniel's stealing the test, he drums on the door to warn him.
Yeah, but this is the last thing that he does that makes me make note of him.
Okay, gotcha.
Because Weird Urges apparently covers grabbing tits.
Yeah, the Weird Urges thing. It's unexplained, and she accuses him of being stoned. Like, why would you do that? Are you lit? Does she say lit? Not in the current popular.
High, yeah. But yeah, and so then he also has like a flirting with the girl thing. Or whatever.
With Sarah,
yeah.
And shitting on Abba, or not shitting on Abba, trying really hard because can't close that door, right? What did I talk about last time? He's always flirting with girls, and he never wants to close that door. So he's going to be nice to Sarah, even though she likes Abba, and he undoubtedly hates disco because he's mentioned that before. So he's going to keep talking to Sarah about Abba.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about how you mentioned that he's always like chatting up girls. And so, later on, he's going to temporarily chat up a girl, and it's going to potentially distract him from his mission and helping Daniel steal a test. But Daniel's stealing the test because he didn't realize when Lindsay offered to tutor him, she wasn't going to teach him like magic to do the test with.
Which is the dumbest conceit I've ever heard. Like, I thought you meant magic. What?
Yeah. And so, but that's also when Daniel and Sam have a moment together where Sam explains that he's feeling like, he doesn't know enough about chicks, man. And Daniel's going to figure out a way to help him out.
Yeah. So we see them in their sex ed class, and Coach Frederick Coach Biff Tannen, lays into him and really humiliates him in class by making him teach the class, and asking him where certain.
That is the first scene.
Yeah,
so we are jumping around.
I'm sorry. It's on my list. It's on my list. That's why I mentioned it, because they're talking about the female anatomy, and the other kids in class are laughing at him because he can't point out where the ovaries are, where the cervix is. Can any one of those kids pick that out? Could any one of those kids in that class do that?
It also is like a really annoying scene because Sam gets in trouble because Bill and Neil are fucking off.
Yeah.
And he's like, shh, and he gets in trouble for like not for trying not to fuck off. While Neil talks about how they're talking about how it's like something from Alien.
Yeah. Cool.
Which had me going, so these kids are 13. It's 1980.
Or 14.
VHS is not a thing yet. They all went to go see it. Like, given how overbearing Sam's parents are, they went to go see an R-rated, infamously gory for the time R-rated movie. Sure. Okay, fine. Whatever.
But none of those kids could point out any of that stuff. And I get that there might be some awkward laughter in the room because like, oh, thank God that's not me up there, right? Could Coach Fredrickson, do you think that this character, Coach Fredrickson, could name any of the female anatomy? Because he is like literally lecturing the class by reading from the book.
Right, because that's how it's a coach teaching sex ed. It's exactly how it should be done.
So I was a little bit annoyed by that, just because it was like, come on, smart guy, come on, Dr. Love, teach me something. And it's like, you don't know any of this shit either, dude. You're literally reading it from a book.
No, because this episode like majorly turns around at about 14 minutes in. That's actually what happens.
Yeah.
But it does introduce everybody calling Sam Dr. Love for a bit, which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
Because it upsets him then with Cindy, the cheerleader, which is going to be a thing later on. But yeah, so Daniel, after the tutoring fail, the next day at school, Daniel runs into Sam and gives him something to help him out with his questions about female anatomy.
Yeah.
He gives him a porno on 16 millimeter film. And Neil's got a projector. So they're going to go watch a porn together, a 70s porn, which raises it's amazing how good this episode ends up being, given how many questions are raised by this like subplot. But then, Daniel steals the math test and he wants Lindsay's help prepping the cheat. And Lindsay's like, no, I'm just going to go talk to your teacher, which brings up my point, just disappear. She goes to talk to the math teacher about it. And yes, he does later compare Daniel to one of the losers in Vietnam, to Rosso. But the math teacher tells her that people like Daniel just need to disappear. And she needs to stop letting her hormones get in the way of her brain.
Yeah.
And so she decides, fuck this guy, I'm going to help Daniel cheat. So immediately after that, pretty much, the teacher accuses Lindsay of helping Daniel cheat and says that he got a note.
An anonymous note.
Anonymous note.
Ooh.
And then there's a moment where she runs into Lindsay and
Millie.
Lindsay runs into Millie. It becomes important later, but it does just seem like a reason to have this character in the episode. But then we get to the teenage boys watching the porno together, and it is simultaneously not well done and incredibly effective, because while Neil is very into the porno, and by Sam are not.
And by very into it, he's like studying it. It's like he's not stimulated by it. He's watching it for like technique. If he had a pen and a piece of paper, he would have been taking notes.
Do you think there are short porn stars? Is his response. But meanwhile, like Bill and Sam are just like very upset by whatever they're watching.
They're increasingly not looking at the screen and it's kind of scooting back. And it's clear that it's not like, oh my God, I'm so aroused by this that I'm uncomfortable. No. They don't even want to look at it.
Right. They're very uncomfortable. They're experiencing peer pressure and staying. It's very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So let's see.
And it impacts the next day when they're in school. Like
so that's gonna. I'm sorry. I'm looking at my notes and I'm trying to remember when Lindsay finds out that Daniel's gonna cheat forever. Is that the next day?
That's after they get caught. Yeah, they're called in for a meeting.
Yes,
about it.
Okay, so it's later. So yes, so after that, Sam goes home. He doesn't want his dinner. Like he's not doing well. And so at school, Daniel's telling Lindsay not to worry. They're going to get through this cheating thing, though. Or no, actually, that came right before dinner because the teacher is going to call Dad and tell on Lindsay that night, and Lindsay's going to storm off on Mom and Dad, which seems like a weird end to the scene. Like,
well, she's mad because they don't believe her, because they just automatically take the side of the teacher, which again makes her less sympathetic because we, the viewers, know that she's cheating, and that she has done this horrible thing, but it's still understandable to be upset that your parents don't believe you. But it seems like a weird place to end that story. Yeah, it's disingenuous to having cheated than like shit on your parents for not believing you when you're lying to them.
Well, especially like the arc that she's had so far in the season, in that the first episode, she said she could never lie to her parents. And we had that conversation where you're like, no, she would tell them. And I'm like, she would not tell them. Clearly she would not. But anyway, so the next day at school, the next day at school, Neil now understands the joke.
Yeah.
After watching the porno, which is interesting because we're going to establish pretty soon that Sam, even after having multiple things explained to him about sex, does not understand the joke.
Yeah.
So we also never get to hear this joke is just.
We never get to hear the full thing.
I always think back about how like this was like a trope for a while, that you had the incomplete joke, so you didn't actually have to write a funny joke. Like, okay, fine. Like, I'm sure it was funny on All in the Family. Something, right? Like,
yeah.
It was tired by the third time they did it on, the Jeffersons 2 years later, right? Like, it's a trope. But Millie confronts Lindsay about the cheating, and Lindsay confesses, and Millie doesn't believe her. She just thinks she's like a good actress or something. But that's when we then get to see how like affected Sam and Bill are. Like, they can't like taste food anymore.
And Neil, surprisingly, like, so the big thing with Sam is that Cindy comes up to talk to him, to invite him to some fair that they're having to help her serve ice cream. And he can't even look at her after having seen the horrible things done to undoubtedly horrible things that were done to a woman in a 70s porn. He can't even look at her.
And so, and we'd already established that he wanted to go help her at this fair or whatever. And she didn't need his help before, but now she needs his help, and he can't deal with it.
So this has traumatized these poor kids.
Yeah. And Bill has no outlet. Like, Bill just is entirely supporting traumatized.
Yeah.
So Mr. Rosso and Lindsay have a meeting where he tells her a story about how somebody wanted her to cheat, him to help them cheat, and he didn't. And she's like, so did the person learn how to do it? And he's like, no, I got my ass kicked.
Yeah.
So after that is when Lindsay talks to Kim about how they're going to be studying. She's going to help Daniel with his studies. And Kim's like, what are you talking about, man? He's just going to have somebody else help him cheat.
Yeah.
And Lindsay's like, wait, Daniel's been lying to me? I am shocked.
Yeah.
I've never learned anything in this show. So
she's book smart.
Freaks and Geeks.
She's book smart, but she's not people smart, which is going to come into play again. Continue.
Okay, so then Daniel and Lindsay she's telling him how she's feeling bad, how she's going to confess. And that's when we get Daniel explaining to her that when he was 11 in middle school, they told the kids that when you get to high school, you're going to be track 1, track 2, or track 3. and you, sir, are track 3 and you're going nowhere.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure the corollary was when I was in middle school, I was told I was track 2. So, but I had a very similar experience with a middle school coach, which is weird that a coach is telling the gym teachers telling you about how you're going to be doing academically, but whatever. That sort of toxic male reinforcement, negative reinforcement thing that they do. And at this point, it's unclear maybe whether or not Daniel's manipulating her, because this is the manipulating scene.
Yeah.
Go.
So he's telling this sob story, and he seems to be legitimately upset, and he's crying. And Lindsay stops. And this is where her like people skills kind of suddenly come back. She goes, You're manipulating me. And oh God, that hit so good for me. That hit so good because I wish that I had the balls or the gumption to first of all, recognize when somebody's manipulating me. I'm so naive. I'm happy to give people a benefit of the doubt. And 2, look them directly in the face and say, you're doing this. Stop doing this. And he's like, no, I'm not. I promise. But it felt so good just to hear her say it. So I think she's putting the pieces together, right? She recognizes that he's just going to keep cheating. Kim even says, he's gotten himself out of worse. He gets himself out of everything. And I just thought it felt so good that she finally put the pieces together and recognized that this guy was, even though he's handsome and whatever, she finally realized she can't let her hormones rule everything, Andrew. No, that part pissed me off because she seems so rational. She just seems so rational, and she's doing dumb things, but teenagers do dumb things. But the fact that the teacher told her hormones were controlling her pissed me off to no fucking end. But she recognized the manipulation and she tried to put the kibosh on it. But she agreed then to go through with the lie once they get into the meeting with Mr. Rosso and Mr. Kauchevsky, I think was his name, the math teacher.
Okay, do we want to finish that up, or do we want to talk about Sam and Biff?
Let's finish this up, even though it's the end of the episode, and then talk about Sam and Biff, because we'll end it on a high note.
Okay, I think this ends on a high note too.
I do too, actually.
So after that, in between Daniel, in between the meeting, Mr. Rosso is going to have a meeting with the math teacher, where the math teacher tells him that kids like Daniel's, got you killed in Vietnam. And the math teacher says, well, no, there's no note. I made that up. And Rosso's kind of like, you can't
lie to these kids. Yeah.
And so they go into the meeting where Lindsay's parents have come in for the meeting too. And Rosso's just like, nope, like there is no note. Like he does not expressly say fuckhead lied about it.
Yeah.
But he's like, there's no note. And all of a sudden, mom and dad are very supportive of Lindsay. And, the kids say that they didn't cheat. Everybody believes them right up until the math teacher says...
The math teacher is the only one who doesn't believe.
Doesn't believe it. Says, do the first problem again, Daniel, or and if you get it right, I'll resign. Like, that's it. Like, I'm wrong. So we actually are going to cut away from this scene to build up some tension, because it's kind of like, at this point you can go either way with it, right? Like, it's conceivable that Daniel, when copying it, because he did copy the full fucking thing, right? Like, he could remember how to copy it. I would think that in some ways would be more realistic, that like if you were an experienced cheater, you would remember 4 hours or the next day how to fake this one problem, because if he showed his work or whatever. But he doesn't. Instead, he writes on it, Zeppelin rocks. And Daniel confesses. He says it's not Lindsay's fault. She was just trying to help him. And then he tells his track story again, establishing that it's probably true. It's very traumatic. It seems to even have an effect it definitely has an effect on Rosso. And it seems to have an effect on the math teacher to some, like.
But it's also almost the identical speech said with the identical words, the identical tone, the identical inflection. And so I think, maybe I'm misreading, Lindsay laughing is her realizing that he is a fucking scam artist and that he's manipulating everybody in the room and everybody's falling for it. And that's how he gets through life.
Which is probably the James Franco story, frankly. So
being handsome and charming only gets you so far when you're also a creep.
So yeah, so she just starts uncontrollably laughing. And I'm just like, mom and dad are in the background having a fit, like, and it's just like great acting from Linda Cardellini. Boner. Linda Boner. Carter Boner. You can leave that in if you want. I don't. Call back to first season, everybody. Yeah, so I mean, like, this was her best acting since the pilot, so that's why I was so happy with this episode is. And then Franco was really good too. Like, and this was also like, yeah, this is, you know, she's the protagonist of the show, but she's also not. She doesn't have full control over her life, so you know, having this sort of, you know, extreme moment just really, at this point, this is what it felt like Freaks and Geeks should be trying to do every episode.
Yeah.
Instead of.
And her motivation, even though she did the wrong thing, she did it for the right reasons.
She did it for the right reasons. And some of this actually has an analog in the boys' story. Is it is tragic that she was not able to explain to anybody, well, no, I fucking did it because like this math teacher's a sexist pig. Fuck that guy. Like, no. Yeah. Like,
and not to mention classist. I mean, he's talking about what a dirtbag this guy is and how he doesn't deserve to be around.
Yeah, Rosso sort of steps in on that a bit.
Yeah.
Though. So, I mean, there is that resolution to that Rosso is willing to side with Daniel over this fucking guy. But like, Lindsay does not have an outlet for talking about like the sexism she experiences.
No. She can't talk about it with Kim because she's witnessed Kim being handled by grown men.
Well, there's that, but there's also like Kim's a bully. Kim thinks thinking is stupid. Like,
yeah.
Kim's a trope. Like, Kim's not a trope. I feel like Kim would be better if she were a trope, but she's like there as a romantic rival sometimes for Lindsay, and sometimes she's there to like move along plots with the freaks. Like,
but she's also getting a little bit nicer. She's
this episode, yes, and and we discover she too suffers from abuse from Jason Segel, who's a fucking prick, basically, and he just gets away with it. So that's cool. Yeah. So no, I loved that. I love non sequitur endings like that, and I thought that it was a nice, especially since we'll talk about it now. The Coach Biff and Sam thing has like they push it in a way that Lindsay cracking up at the end, they don't like try to skip over something that they could have, which will make more sense when we talk about this.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Okay.
So Sam still seeking answers to his question about the joke, but also with a whole range of new questions from his experience watching the porn. Does the teacher pull him aside after class?
So Biff is answering questions.
That
the boys have submitted, starting with whether or not having sex with a pregnant woman will result in dents in the baby's head. Which I know didn't start here. I don't know where it would have started, but
more urban myths, right? More urban myths.
Right. But he pulls Sam aside and he's like, you asked a really weird question. We kind of need to talk about this. And Sam's like, how would you know it was me? It was supposed to be anonymous. And he's like, nobody else has Star Trek lined paper, man.
Yeah.
Which I thought was nice.
I thought that was funny.
But yeah, so Biff and Sam have this, so Sam explains that he saw a movie and it left him with a lot more questions and he doesn't feel great about them. And so Biff is like, okay, so this is not part of the curriculum. I could get fired if I tell you this, but I can tell you this. So you just need to take it seriously. So Biff's going to tell him what's up.
He takes him into his office that conveniently has windows so we can see what's going on, but we can't hear anything. And it's this great moment where the camera pans between Coach Fredrickson and Sam Weir, and the coach is animatedly explaining things, and we get half a dozen reaction shots from Sam. And it could be anything from disgust to hysterical laughter. And it is so funny with like some great music, recognizable music, but I can't name it off the top of my head, in the background. And it is so great. I loved it. I thought Biff did a great job.
Biff does a great job. Well, and this is what I said in the first one is there's some more depth to Coach Biff than just the gym teacher thing.
Yeah.
And that comes through here.
Yeah.
It does. I thought it went on a little bit long. Like we get the grossed out, then we get the laughing, but then we get like hysterical laughing and stuff. But by the end of this, Sam still doesn't understand the joke. So he asks Biff the joke and it cuts away. So while it's incredibly successful, I do have some points to raise. First is, how did Neil get the joke? He has no more information than Sam does, and he, at this point, has less information than Sam does. What the fuck was this movie? Okay, because when Biff closes his door, and then the music starts, and we don't get to hear it. But the first thing he says is, "There's some men who like to, well, not me, but," and I'm like, what the fuck did James Franco give this kid?
Yeah.
Right? Like, because I mean, like, 70s porn was pretty mainstream. We've all seen Boogie Nights, right? Like, but apparently he gave the kid something really uncomfortable.
I wonder if it was some kind of bondage or something. I don't know.
But whatever the coach tells him makes Sam feel good enough that he can go have a nice scene with Cindy where she doesn't actually need his help anymore because she's got a fill-in person, but she can always use more help.
Aww.
And so,
she's a good egg. I told you, she's a really good egg.
It's just a nice. It's like, it's kind of like an easy resolution to that plot, right? Like, because I mean, basically, Bill and Sam's arc is they are disgusted at their participation of the exploitation of women, right, as sex objects, and they're able to like ignore Bill for that, right, because he's not the lead, and then Sam gets to get it resolved passively, and the show doesn't even have to do any work with it, right? Like it gets turned into a well-executed comedy beat, albeit one that goes on a little long, and make Biff better, like, right, like make Sam able to have, like, as opposed to Daniel and the math teacher, Biff is able to like be empathetic to a geek, right? So I mean, it's like it's a positive reaction, it's a positive interaction in a way that kids rarely get on the show with the adults, because at best they're going to get Rosso, and he's a fucking hippie nerd, right? Like, He's like a Simpsons character from before the Simpsons sucked, like
yeah, he is. He's the hippie guidance counselor. It's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
It's a Simpsons character. You're right.
It all works out. And so it's really impressive how they're able to do that, even though they actually don't do anything.
Yeah.
They figure out a way to do this arc without actually having to do this arc.
Yeah.
But, hey, whatever, it worked.
Yeah, it works. So my favorite thing about the joke that we never hear the full version of is that Sam, we just talked about how he, at the end of this conversation with Coach Fredrickson, he still doesn't understand the joke. He asked Harris, the geek guru, and Harris refused to tell him. I can't tell you. You're too young. You're too young.
It's unclear whether or not Harris got the joke in my opinion.
And it's unclear whether or not he got it. Then Sam goes home. This is my favorite. He goes home and he tells his parents. He tells his parents this joke that presumably if you need an anatomy book and you need a porno to understand it, is a dirty joke. It is a sexual dirty joke about a paraplegic ringing a doorbell with his penis, presumably. I'm just guessing because I haven't heard the full joke. And he tells his parents, and his mom's reaction is, I don't get it. And I almost believe her. But when dad is asked if he gets it, he's like, no. Like, it's very much like, where did you hear this? They don't express any concern about it, though. That's my other thing. It's not like, where did you hear it? Who told you this joke? I'm going to have to call their parents. It's nothing like that. It's just like, no, I don't get it. And then they move on. They have, when you outsource sex education to schools, you have to take responsibility for your kids learning things on the playground. I thought that was very funny, though, that he asked his parents. I never did anything that stupid. I was never that clueless.
Yeah, Harris is like, you guys are so young. Oh, that was another point is Harris now had an accompanying Asian mysticism track, which I thought was a little, I don't know. I would hope that if I were in charge of music editing in 1999, I would be like, this is a little weird. We shouldn't do this, but it's 1999. There's much worse things.
Yeah.
From that era. But yeah, it was, because it like the episode. I think my thing with the Halloween episode is that it very much tried to avoid it. For the Lindsay arc, it gave her a pass, right? And like, it didn't just give her a pass on character development. It let her embrace her child. It let her embrace immaturity by, getting away with it, handing out candy with mom. Like, she gets to like forget that moment of like, no, for 4 hours I was incredibly cruel, and the only reason I stopped was because I thought I was going to get in trouble for it, right?
Yeah.
And that's a really weighty thing to look at with a high school show, right? Because like the whole point is that people don't learn their lesson. Like, we get to regret things for the rest of our fucking lives. Whereas in the second one, like all of that sort of collided for her, and she got to have her breakout moment. And then with Sam, with the Halloween one, his whole arc is set off by him not wanting to grow up for weird anti-intellectual reasons. And what, man? Like what? He's going to be the C- president? Sure. Okay. Whatever the fuck Bush said. But yeah, and then in the second one, he at least gets to like finish this arc, and regardless of the details of I don't know. 99. Yeah, I mean, Boogie Nights came out in 97, right? So
I think so, yeah.
Whatever. I mean, who knows? But I mean, again, my other thing is, what the fuck's Daniel doing with this fucking like snuff porn or whatever? Like, right? Like,
yeah. He doesn't say where he gets it. He doesn't say. He just says he wants it back. Don't let it get confiscated. Don't take it out of the bag. Weird. The thing that drove me the most crazy about it, and it's only afterwards, thinking back on it. There's a trend with adults reading young adult books. And I've never been a huge young adult fan, but every once in a while I just pick one up and I read it and I'm like, oh my God, I love this so much. And then I look back on it and I'm like, actually, this is incredibly unrealistic. Like, this gay teenage boy is like open and out, and he gets along really well with both of his parents, who are still married. He's wealthy, and like he's out at school and has a boyfriend. Like, it's like, this is so unrealistic. And this kid isn't like having like hormonal rages, like, not rages, but you know what I mean? Like, there's not like all of this. I feel like maybe I was more fucked up as a teenager than these kids, than Lindsay Weir, who seems to be just so level-headed and so like rational and reasonable. And she can make decisions because she was brought up well. She can make decisions and accept the consequences of them, except for in this, where she just doesn't want to get in trouble. I just find it so unrealistic that teenagers aren't just like losing their minds with hormones and difficult decisions. And, Sam says at the beginning, like, we're not adults. We're kids still. Like, she says we need to act like an adult, but we're still kids. And like, that's how I felt. It's like, ugh. So how can Lindsay accept all of this responsibility and be so level-headed and not? And
I mean, she's a Mary Sue is why.
Yeah, I know. It just drives me crazy, because I don't feel like I was like that, and I don't feel like any of my friends were like that. Like, they weren't awful people, but but everybody struggles, and she's lost that struggle again in that first pilot episode. She's struggling with the death of her grandmother, and she was the only one in the room, and there's no meaning to life, and there's no afterlife, and that's just gone.
It's gone.
Now she's hanging out with the freaks, which is fine. She's expanding her worldview. And, but she seems to be like, she's trying to figure things out, but she doesn't seem to be really struggling, except for with her mom not handing out candy. She can't figure out how to tell her mom, I'm going to go hang out with my friends. My mom didn't have those expectations that I was going to be at home all the time. So,
well, I mean, I think that something that they don't address, other than the parents disapproving of her new friends, is that her parents should be disapproving of her new friends, right? Yeah. Like, that's the thing, is it's not like she's hanging out with, I don't know, what, the AV club or something, right? Like, she's hanging out with the not quite criminal delinquents, right? The misdemeanor delinquents. And like, the only reason she's doing it is because she thinks James Franco's hot, right? Like,
and Daniel shows up at the door with a cigarette, and Dad's not like, nope, you're not coming around. You're not allowed in our house. You're not coming in.
Or like, we're not going to sit down and meet you or something. Like, and that seems like it would be a thing with that dad, right?
With that whole family. They're so, like you said, with Sam, it just seems very regimented. They seem very, not controlling, but, they know what's going on. And so not knowing, I would think, would really not fit with the scheme.
Incredibly unaware of everything going on with Lindsay. And we've already like established that, like, she's not like on probation, but she has been making some drastic changes that you'd think they would have realized, right? Like, we're still hearing about mathletes, even though she's not in it anymore. Like, the parents are conveniently disinterested in their kids, since their kids got a TV show. They're disinterested except when they need to be around. So I mean, it's like, and again, it's 1999. tell me a show that had a female, an hour-long high school show that had a female showrunner in 1999. Like, no, like it's, and I mean, that is the problem. And I think I said that about the second episode, is that it is, Lindsay's a female protagonist written by men for men. Like, that's some of the problem with it. Like, and you see all of the sort of I'm trying to think of a better word than signs of that, but like that's just what it is. Like,
yeah.
So,
I mean, you see her having some strength again. Like, I was pretty envious of her ability to, number one, recognize, and number two, call out James Franco for being manipulative. But maybe that's something men and boys can do better than women and girls. I don't know, because I'm just a girl, just a baby.
I would,
but I think it brought a little bit of extra strength to her, and it made me.
It did. I don't know though, because I mean, like, dudes like Joe Rogan, dudes are fucking idiots. So I mean, like, dudes like James Franco and go along with what he says, right? Like, if we've learned anything, it's that,
The thing about the Seth Rogen character, though, is he's not in this last episode that we're talking about.
No.
And he was not supposed to be hanging out with them on Halloween. He was supposed to be going to a Ted Nugent concert. That's dumb. I get it. But he seems to have more of an independent life away from his friends. So,
I mean, that also we're running into, what are there? There are 9 people in the main cast-ish, right? 3 plus 4 plus 2, depending on how you want to count the adults. So, I mean, like, it's a relatively big cast, it is a big cast, but it has we follow 2 characters, right? And so everybody's an accessory to either Sam or Lindsay or them together. And it's just like, it's like how Kim has been one way and then another way, and then one way and then another way. Like, Millie is, she's an obnoxious Christian girl when they needed her to be. She's an obnoxious geek when they needed her to be. Like, she has no character arc yet. And I think you said that that's going to change over time, that people will get character arcs. But I mean, that's another thing is, though, 1999 TV, like, nobody had a fucking sustainable character arc, please. Like, it took like George Clooney had one. It took 3 seasons of ER and then he quit, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you had a sustained character arc, you were quitting to become a movie star or something. Like, that sort of mentality of we need 100 episodes to get to syndication no matter what, and so people need to be able to watch at any time, it really hampers the idea of television as anything but like sort of a weekly background thing to let you know what movie's opening tomorrow, and then what kind of soap you should buy.
Sell you car insurance.
So it is a product of its time in that way. It's just, like I said, I've heard great things about the show and I wanted it to deliver you want it to have that acknowledgement of itself and what it was doing. And it's like, it doesn't do that.
Yeah.
It does not tend to do that.
Well,
and sometimes it doesn't do that in great ways, like outbursts, and in good ways, like, just don't think too hard about what these guys have to be talking about, because like, I don't know. I feel like the Sam and Bill thing, I don't know though. I don't think you could actually do it. You couldn't have done it better. You couldn't have actually addressed it on a TV show. Like, I don't think you could. I don't think you could do it today. Like, it's such a, it'd be such a complicated thing to talk about.
Yeah.
And it would be so, I mean, there's just no resolution to it either in a way, because like, whatever. But it was a good episode. Like, you're the one who brought us down, man. Talking about her being a Mary Sue.
Sorry.
So I was the one who said she was a Mary Sue. And I realized that term has misogynist connotations to it, I believe, just because it is used mostly by white men to complain about how women are written and things.
Well, and I phrased my "you're manipulating me" conversation very much in a way to avoid misogyny, but in this case, it's Daniel who's crying and coming up with a sob story to try to manipulate Lindsay and the teachers and whoever will listen to him, right? But yeah, I mean, I find it the same way when you talk about manipulation. It's hard to avoid the notion of it being a misogynist concept, in my opinion. But
yeah, especially with Daniel, who we've established knows about Lindsay. Like he knows he can manipulate Lindsay because she likes him.
Yeah.
Like, because he's a fucking jerk. Like, show's still just about a bunch of fucking asshole teenagers.
Yeah, pretty well, teenagers. So next week we will be discussing episodes 5 and 6
in air order, not in
air order, which I'm trying to be careful with this here, which is I'm with the band and Carded and Discarded. I'm very excited about Carded and Discarded. It's been a while since I've seen this, so I'm very excited. And hopefully my excitement is worthy. Hopefully it's worthy of being excited about. Okay, so I will talk to you next week. Anything else you want to say to close up?
Nope. Thanks for listening, everyone. And nobody could see you, do
I know. I'm being goofy.
Yeah. I don't know. Next time. See how much fucking we can talk around James Franco being James Franco.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you for listening.